entails so much effort and is consistently riddled with challenges and transitions and learning how to adjust and shift and adapt. And I would say that during this time period, 2020 and now going into 2021, that ability to transition, adjust, and adapt has been called upon onto even greater measures as we have all struggled through this time period of the pandemic. And I'm talking about struggles within our marital relationships, within our homes, in adjusting to all of the changes, to financial changes, to work changes, to household responsibility changes, to educational changes, child rearing changes. I mean, you name it, we've had to deal with it. And today I really wanted to talk about the possibility, the potential of being able to move through these transitions and adjustments with the most positive feelings as possible. I think there's a lot to be said for the ability to do technical planning with your partner, with your spouse, and to come up with a technical plan that works well for your family, including hours and days and who's doing what and splitting responsibilities. And that is very important. But today we're really going to focus on the ability to communicate emotionally surrounding all of these changes and surrounding the shifting roles. I want to do that through the lens of a very specific case, okay, that I'm going to present. And I hope that the principles that I'm bringing forward, each of you will be able to utilize in your own relationships, in your own lives, for your own selves, and for the partnership. I just want to preface that by saying that these ideas, these topics are being shared with the understanding that you are in a safe relationship, both emotionally, physically, and verbally, that there's no abuse going on in any of those areas. If there is, I strongly encourage you to seek help immediately, and to continue forward in that seeking help dimension. With the understanding that we are in a safe relationship and there is the ability for trust, for mutual not only pleasure, but mutual enjoyment and mutual understanding one of the other. Yes, I'm a sex therapist, so my brain will always go to pleasure, but I'm going to stick with this topic of emotional closeness. And here we're going to meet, here the case that I wanted to bring forward is a case of a family. Their names are Danny and Heather, and they have 3 young children, 2 boys and a little girl. The girl was born at the beginning of the pandemic, so in the beginning it was hard, but the schedules weren't as intense because Heather was on maternity leave. And once she went back to work full time, what they decided worked best for them was that Heather would work from 4 a.m. to 2 p.m. and Danny would manage the home and the kids and the meal prep and the food prep and the shopping. And then come 2 p.m. they would switch, and Heather would be on with the kids and with the family and with the house and the laundry. Don't forget the laundry, right? And Danny would work from 2 p.m. until midnight about. And what happens is that he comes out of his home office at midnight, and he comes out to see that the dinner that he prepared, pots and pans, are still in the sink, and dishes are around, and the kitchen is a mess, and the house is a mess. And the first night he ignores it. The second night he kind of doesn't say anything. By the third night he's angry. And what happens? Heather comes out to say, "How are you? How is your work day?" Right? And she's awake still. She's nursing the baby, or she's feeding the baby, whatever is going on. And he lets it rip. He kind of explodes, not in a vicious way, but just in like, I don't understand what's going on here. Why is the house such a mess? I work so hard. I manage to keep it clean. Why can't you keep it clean? And how does she respond? Potentially tears, and she's crying, or she responds in anger back, and they start a fight, an argument, okay? And so I want to just pause from here for a minute. So I feel like, again, everybody take this example to basically any other discussion that could be going on between a couple, okay? And think about how it applies to you in your life. And I want to pause frame just to talk for a minute about anger, okay? There's a lot of literature out there about how anger is bad and how we need to control our anger and anger management and support group. And so many, anger has like a little bit of a negative rap, let's say. And I would say that in some cases it is only negative. But what I have seen time and again in my clinic here in Beit Shemesh, in my private practice, and also in Jerusalem, is that anger is serving to protect the person who is feeling it. What happens is there's a series of events that happens that there's a certain emotion that comes up, and it's a painful emotion, and it doesn't feel good for the person, for the individual. So what happens, instead of feeling that painful negative emotion, anger comes and says, don't worry, I'm going to protect you. It comes up as a defense, and it pushes back, and it pushes out. And that is what we're seeing as, anger, but it's very often part of a greater defense mechanism. Hashem gave us anger. I very much see anger as a way to actually protect the individual from the painful feelings that they may be feeling. Okay, now again, this isn't across the board, but I do see it time and again. And what I'm encouraging here is for the person, for the individual, here, Danny, to pause. And you all can do this at home. You can take a minute and pause me for 10 seconds, 10 minutes, whatever works. And take a minute to pause. What is the feeling? And think about, what is the feeling that is coming up for me? What is it before the anger, under the anger? And sometimes this takes a long time. Sometimes it can come to you clearly. Sometimes it's triggered by childhood events. Sometimes it's triggered by past events in the relationship. And sometimes it's just comes up from you, from yourself. And this might entail like an individual therapy process to get to the bottom of, or not. It could just take some mindfulness. There's some great mindfulness stuff out there nowadays. Being able to stop and check in with yourself of what am I really feeling? What is really going on for me? And what I'm going to bring forward here today, possibly for Danny, is he's feeling undervalued in the relationship, disrespected, potentially that he put in all this effort of keeping order, and here Heather kind of like let it all fall to the wayside, and what he did isn't seen as valuable. He's feeling undervalued and disrespected in the relationship. Now, in his ability to recognize that for himself, the next step, the next thing that I encourage, I think is so important, is to find the words to be able to express that in a meaningful way to your spouse. Now, here's a prerequisite on that. The spouse has to be ready to hear it, okay? So how does that happen? So first of all, there could be a discussion about, are we ready to have a serious conversation? Are we both available emotionally to have emotional conversation? Because it entails a lot from the listener here, from the receiver, we're going to call Heather, okay? In order for her, what we're asking for her is to be present for his emotional experience without bringing her own baggage in, without being like, well, I did this and I did that, and the baby didn't stop crying, and she won't go to sleep, and the boys were fighting. For her to be able to listen and be present for him, and to understand his experience, to be present for his emotional experience. And so that takes a lot out of her also. And so can we set up that situation to happen? Now, one approach that I love to use, the Imago approach, I encourage you to look into that more. I also really love the eye-to-eye work, the initiator and inquirer work of Ellen Bader and Pete Peterson from the Couples Institute, where the initiator is bringing forward their emotion, and the inquirer's job is to really be curious and to understand what that emotion is, and then to be present for the emotional experience. And that piece, that's the piece that I am most familiar with from the Imago work, is the ability to validate the other person's experience. And this practice, so that night, let's say it's a Tuesday night, that night Heather works on it to be able to be there for Danny to validate his emotional experience, and then later on in the week they might flip roles and try to be there as the initiator and the inquirer, or as the listener and the giver and the receiver. As the giver and the receiver. That Heather will be able to tap into what's going on for her, and for her to be able to bring forward her personal emotions surrounding any specific situation that the couple is dealing with. I hope that this is clear. I feel like I gave a lot of really important points quickly. You could totally feel free to be in touch with me. To clarify, my address is abby@jewishintimacy.com. You could check me out on my website also, jewishintimacy.com. And what I'm strongly encouraging here is the ability for each of us individually to pause, to breathe, to check in with ourselves, okay? To notice what's coming up for ourselves. That might entail closing your eyes. That might entail going for a walk alone, together. This conversation doesn't necessarily need to happen face-to-face. It could happen on a walk. It could happen on a date. It could happen, I don't recommend over text or email. It's definitely a conversation that needs to happen between two people. And we make the time to first check in with ourselves and also to be able to express ourselves clearly and coherently and emotionally to our partners. I wish you hatzlacha and consistent calmness in your relationships and your homes. Take care.